Hey guys, today we'll be learning about the features which were added as a part of ES6, and we'll be also understanding what ES6 is and what are the bunch of features that were added as a part of ES6. Since Node.js is a runtime environment for JavaScript, we write literally all codes in JavaScript and we pass that JavaScript code to our node. So it becomes very crucial for us to understand what ES6 is and what were the new features added as part of the ES6 version. So ES6 stands for ECMAScript 6. And ECMAScript is like a organization that gives us standardized JavaScript. It maintains like a standard of what new features would be added. And all the other VM engines like Chakra and you have the Google's V8 engine follows those standards. So in ES6 is the sixth version of ECMAScript and it was published in 2015. And as part of these release, there were a lot of new features which was added, and there were a lot of new syntax changes which was also done, like arrow functions, let and const keywords, default parameter, arrow functions, spread operators, rest operators, and many more, which we'll be discussing. So let's go through some of these features which we often will be using while writing the JavaScript code. So before we start, let me show you like how we run JavaScript codes in Node.js. So let me first create a new file and name it as app.js. And then let's write a basic JavaScript code that prints hello world. So the code for that is console.log hello world. Now what you need to do is you need to open the terminal and you can type the command node followed by the file, the JS file that you want to and execute. So in this case, it would be the app.js file which we are going to execute. So we say node app.js. Now, one thing to note here is that it's not mandatory to type the file extension name like .js. Node expects the next parameter to be JS file. So if you don't specify the extension .js, node assumes that whatever you're passing is a JS file and it would go forward and execute it. But if it's not a JS file, it will kind of throw you an error. So if you even don't put JS, it would work. So now if you see, it prints the word hello world. It prints the command or the word hello world. Now that we know how to run a program using Node or any JavaScript using Node, let us look at the very first feature, which we call it as template literals. So template literals are actually a string literals allowing you embedded expressions. What I mean by that is like you can embed any JavaScript expressions within a string. So a template literals are enclosed by the backtick character instead of double quotes or single quotes. The template literals can contain placeholders, and this placeholders is nothing but your expression, and it's denoted by dollar symbol and curly braces. So general syntax for the template literals look something like this. You have a dollar symbol and curly braces. Inside the curly braces you have something called as expressions. So this expressions is nothing but a JavaScript expression. So what I'll do is I'll let's take an example. What I'll do is I'll replace this expression with a ternary operator, which would do a check if 10 is greater than 20, and if that holds true, we would print 10 is greater than 20. Otherwise it would print 20 is greater than 10. So yeah, now that's written, what we'll do is we'll open our terminal and we'll write the command node app.js. And if you see, it prints 20 is greater than 10. So what just happened? What it did was while printing the template literal, what it did was it validated that expression. After validating, it checked is 10 greater than 20, and no, that's not the case. So it went and executed 20 is greater than 10, and that's what you see here. Another advantage of using template literal is that it supports multi-line functionality. So back like previously prior to ES6, if you had to create multiple line or if you had to write a lot of paragraphs or some type of multi-line statements like I'm doing, you'd see how we used to write it. We used to use backslash and then on the new line we'll write another line and we use the plus operator to add it. But now using template literals, this becomes literally easy. You can just enclose this entire string in a backtick, and even using the expression, the template literals, the dollar symbol and curly braces, you can add dynamic value as well. So for example, let's just show you. I'll say a variable a is equal to certain value, and I'll put over here, I'll put the print, instead of 10 I'll print the value of a. So instead of line 2 I'll print the value of a. So I do that. Now if I go and I execute, we'll see value of 10 is coming there. So let's take an other example, so that we understand more. So let's take another example. So what I'll do is I'll create a function called as multiply, which will take two parameters a and b, and then it will multiply. The purpose of this operation or the function is to multiply two numbers. So the function, what it would do is it would will use the backtick operators or template literals, and will create a template which prints a value in certain format. Will print the value which is stored in a into the value stored in b is equal to the multiplication of a and b. So to do that, we write dollar in the curly braces a into dollar curly braces b is equal to dollar curly braces a into b. So now, yeah, once that's done, what I'll do is I'll write a function. I'll call this function outside from here. So I'll call it twice. For the first function, I'll pass parameter 10 and 20, and for the second function call, I'll pass the parameter 20 and 10. Now when I go back to my terminal, I write node app.js. You'll see it prints 10 into 20 is equal to 200, and 200 into 10 is equal, sorry, 20 into 10 is equal to 200. Now what we do is, let's do something else. Now let us make a call to the multiply function and pass only one parameter, that is 10, instead of two parameters. So when I execute the code, you will see that it prints 10 into undefined is equal to NaN. This is because in JavaScript the function parameters are declared as undefined by default. So if you don't pass the value to that parameter, the parameter is set to undefined, and in our case the variable b is set to undefined. So to avoid this, we will have a default value assigned to a function parameter named b. And traditionally, if we had to do that, we do it by adding a particular check. So we add a check to see that if b is of type undefined, then we set the value as 1. We set the value of b equal to 1. Now if I go back and to my terminal and I type node app.js and I run the code, you'll see 10 into 1 is equal to 1. So now if you want to assign a default value for a, we have to do the same thing and it will work. But imagine if there are a lot of parameters, a lot of arguments that you have to set default value to. Imagine the amount of code and amount of work you had to write. But using the new features which was added in ES6 called as default parameters, this work has become very easy for us. All we have to do is, in the function, when we define the function, we just have to say b is equal to 1 and e equal to 1. This explicitly tells the interpreter if there is no value passed to it, you by default set this values to 1. So now in this case, we are telling the interpreter b is equal to 1 and e is equal to 1. That means the default value, if you don't pass, it becomes to 1. So you can even call a function instead of assigning a value. You can even call another function and pass certain values, and based on that validation of the function, you can dynamically add different values, default value as well. So let's do that as well. So let's define a function named validate that returns 10 if the value which is passed, so we have a parameter here. So let's define a function named validate that returns 10 if value of a is greater than 10, else we return 1. So when we call the validate function, we will pass the value of a to the validate function. And now when we run, when we try to execute it, it should execute. Yeah, so that's it. If you see, the code has been executed.